welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. Delighted to be with you on another Tuesday. I hope you had a great weekend. As we get into this episode, I do want to remind you, as always, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. Really does help the algorithm. If you would like to help in another fashion, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info, leave a tip or a donation, and that is something else that really does help not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. You can leave a question or a comment there as well. Happy to engage with those at the beginning of the next episode after I receive them. Again, you see that link next to me in the video. It's also scrolling along the bottom of the entire episode. It is gsmcpodcast.info. As always, every bit of support that you give this podcast is always greatly appreciated, no matter what support that, no matter what form that support takes. So thank you again for tuning into this episode. How is your week going? It's Thanksgiving week, so maybe you're already off. Maybe you're working all week except Thursday. I don't know, but how's your Thanksgiving week going so far? Are you traveling anywhere? Thanksgiving's not a thing here, so we're not going anywhere, but gonna spend the day not working and celebrating, commemorating the holiday. Gonna hopefully make a pie, but nothing too crazy. How was your weekend? It was quiet, but it was busy. I actually, on Friday, right before the weekend, I met a friend for coffee that I haven't seen in several months, so that was nice to catch up with her. I also baked a loaf of sourdough bread. I don't know if I've told you about my sourdough bread experimentation. I just made my own starter a few months ago, and I've always wanted to try it, and it's going fairly well. Every loaf gets a little bit better, but it's certainly still a work in progress. And every time I think of, or I realize and understand something that I could do a little bit different, so I try to incorporate that into the next loaf, and they're all getting a little bit better, but this loaf was my best one yet, and so I gave it to the friend that I had coffee with, and she's so cute because she sliced it and put it in her freezer, and she's been sending me pictures, not every day, but every once in a while I get pictures from her of my sourdough bread out in the wild, so to speak. She's using it for various things. They like to have it for breakfast, and they are from England, so they call it eggs and soldiers. They make eggs and soldiers, and my sourdough is the soldiers. So I love that. I don't know, I think it's fun. At any rate, I hope that you had a good weekend. I also did a bunch of meal prepping, so that was why it was a busy weekend, but not terribly thrilling. I have a love-hate relationship with meal prepping. I tend to hate it in the moment because it's a lot, but I love it after the fact when I can just go to the freezer and I have multiple varieties and options of things, and I don't have to think too much about what I'm going to make on a day when I might not feel like cooking. So love-hate relationship with the meal prepping. We're not here to talk about my sourdough starter or bread or my meal prepping. We're here to talk about books, and I am happy that I have a returning guest this week, and it's not only a returning guest, it is the first ever guest who was on video. As you know, we switched over from audio only to audio and video episodes, I think in April, so maybe 7 months ago, and Justin was my first ever video guest, and now he is back for his second interview with me. Let me bring up this week's book. The book is called The Reluctant Reckoner. It is a thriller, a mystery. Let me give you the description of this book. One email shatters Mark Richter's world. An honest accountant who likes to keep it simple, he's been at the same company for 23 years and prefers things the way they are. Steady, with little excitement and even less change. His 8-year-old daughter, small suburban home, and reliable car are all he needs. But after that email, everything is at risk. Somehow framed for a financial discrepancy that could send him to jail. At first, he's just bewildered. But when the crime mysteriously disappears as quickly as it emerged, it's clear just how outmatched he really is. Then he's kidnapped, blindfolded, and given 3 weeks to steal confidential information. He doesn't know who the perpetrators are, what they need it for, or why they asked him. but he does learn that they know things about him. Personal things. Things they can't possibly know. When they threaten his daughter's life, it feels like it can't possibly get worse. Enter the FBI. His life is infiltrated by agents demanding that he try to outsmart the savvy criminals, or else. The only person he could trust suddenly disappears, and he discovers who the thieves really are. Corruption and deception surround him from every angle. It can and does get worse for the reluctant reckoner. A lot worse. And that is the description of The Reluctant Reckoner by Jay Lee. And that line at the end of the second paragraph there, things can't possibly, or things they can't possibly know, is the last line. But the line I wanted to point out was if the beginning of the last paragraph, it says, it feels like it can't possibly get worse. You should never, ever say that, even if it's only a book description. Don't say it can't get worse. It's absolutely going to get worse. And it does in this book. This is, it's a thriller, but it's, as I always, give you it's not high on my ick factor. It's not high on the eek factor either. Like there are some things that are unpleasant, but it's not way high up on my ick factor, and it's definitely not high on my eek factor. Like it did not keep me awake at night by being scared, maybe by thinking about things that could happen. So it's good for me from the ick and the eek factor. It is fast-paced. It's an enjoyable read. I can relate to Mark. Like all that talk about he likes things the way they are and he really doesn't like change, I can totally relate to that. And I can relate to Mark in a lot of ways. He is an unlikely hero for a thriller like this. Jay and I talk about that during the interview about Mark as having skills, obviously, that the criminals want to use him for, but not being like the type of person that you would expect to be able to get out of a situation like this or to interact in this type of situation. So let's go ahead and let Justin talk more about the book. Again, the title is The Reluctant Reckoner. The author is Jay Lee. Hi, Justin, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It's a real honor to talk with you today.
I'm excited to have you back to talk about your book, but also because you ushered in our video era, and so it's fun to have you back. Usually, I talk to people and I haven't seen their faces, but when they return, but you're my first returning video. I don't know how to phrase that, but.
Wow. Well, I am honored in many ways. It's hard to believe it's been a year, isn't it? Time flies when you're having fun.
It's crazy. Actually, you know what? I don't think it's been a year. I think it was April.
That's true.
I'm not sure.
True. It hasn't even been a full year, so
I have no concept of time. So it could have been. It could have been 5 years.
Well, I'm thrilled to be back. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Just for people who either haven't seen the earlier interview or need a refresher, if you wouldn't mind reintroducing yourself.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Jay Lee, Justin Lee. I go by Jay Lee in the writing realm. And I have published 4 books now. They're all in the mystery, suspense, thriller genre. And I started writing purely because it was just something that I really enjoyed doing in my spare time. I have a day job. I have a family. We live in the suburbs of Chicago. But writing has always been a real special thing for me to do, a release, and in a lot of ways very therapeutic. And my lovely wife suggested that I consider publication. And 6 years and 4 books later, we're humming along and get the opportunity to talk with Sarah here. And it's been real encouraging and real exciting to pursue this. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I love that that your wife read what you wrote, liked it enough to be like, yes, you absolutely should pursue this, and supported you through that. So that's wonderful.
Oh, she's been so incredibly supportive, and she's a much better writer and much smarter than I am, and she has ripped every page to shreds. She's my biggest fan and my best editor, and she loves to do it, but boy, I send her that first draft, and when it comes back to me, I have to like sort of open it real slowly because there's so much red ink all over it that it's been completely transformed. And so she's been incredibly helpful and supportive.
Good. And if she's got any like lingering resentment toward you, she can just use that red pen.
Sometimes I think that's what happens. She really goes after it, but it's incredible. I probably use over 95% of all of her suggestions because it really does make the book better. And ultimately, that's the goal of the editing process, is to make it the best product that you possibly can for who you are, for your readers. And Kristen is pretty phenomenal at helping do that.
Wonderful. Well, this book is called The Reluctant Reckoner, like the alliteration, but can you give an overview of the story?
Sure. So The Reluctant Reckoner kind of centers around an accountant that I would describe as an everyday Joe kind of guy. The inspiration for him was basically as I sat in an office job and looked around, see a lot of good people. They come into work every day, they do their thing, they go to their families, they have their hobbies. But, in the thriller genre, we're surrounded by these ex-SEAL type people, these military trained experts who have all of these skill sets and get themselves out of some pretty murky situations. And I thought, what would happen if more of an everyday kind of Joe was thrust into the middle of a situation? And well, how could that happen? And so the story of The Reluctant Reckoner tells how a typical CPA, I say typical, there's no such thing, but I mean, right. You're sort of what comes to mind when you think of an accountant. He's suddenly thrust into this situation where people know things about him and can really do significant damage to him. The story starts with him being implicated in fraudulent activity at work. And he's told in an anonymous email that the discrepancy will be cleared up soon. And when it does go away through no reason of his own, he realizes that these people know who he is. And when they reach out and they tell him what they want, he suddenly is kind of caught in the middle of this very dangerous world that most of us are not equipped to handle. So the book sort of takes it from there, and without giving away too much detail, highlights how what I would perceive to be as a relatively normal guy tries to navigate some extraordinary situations, and in a lot of cases is running for his life. Yeah. That's the intent. I've gotten some fun feedback from people that said that was the thing that they liked most about it, was that they could actually picture themselves being the protagonist. Mm-hmm. And then in the very next breath, the sentence was, and boy, am I glad I'm not him. Nobody wants to be Mark Richter after they read this book. If they do, then I've done something wrong as the author.
Right. That gives you a little bit more of an overview of the book and Mark as the main character. I do not want to be Mark. I know he's relatable, and you can relate to him as a character because he is kind of an every person character. My husband likes to make fun of, no, not make fun of me, but we have conversations when we're watching shows like, I don't know, The Walking Dead or something along those lines. And he always says, how long would you last in the zombie apocalypse? And I'm like, about 5 minutes. So that's pretty much how I feel about me being the main character in a thriller. I don't think I would make the right choices. I'm pretty sure I would not last very long. And so I'm really glad that Mark is the main character and not me. We are going to take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Mark as that main character and the set of skills that he does bring that are helpful, that not only do the criminals want, but that help him to navigate this situation. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Jay Lee. As we get back into this second segment, I do want to remind you that you can support not only this podcast, but the network as a whole by going to gsmcpodcast.info. There you can leave a tip or a donation that really does help, as I said, not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. Every bit of support that you give, no matter what form of support that support takes, is greatly appreciated. Before the break, we were talking about Mark as the main character of The Reluctant Reckoner and how people can relate to him and kind of see themselves in that role. I said that I can see myself maybe in that role, but I don't think I would do very well. So let's go ahead now and return to the conversation with Justin. Yeah, as when you were talking about your typical protagonist, you often get that Liam Neeson line, I have a very particular set of skills. Well, Mark does have a particular set of skills, but they're not what you expect. So,
well, the irony is it's that particular set of skills that the antagonists find so attractive. Yeah. He has expertise in financial accounting and systems, and that's what they need from him. The fact that he is not in any way a lethal guy makes him all the more appealing to them because they can control him easier and he's not as much of a threat. You wouldn't want to go up to Liam Neeson and ask him for some help because he could just turn on you real quick. Mark is kind of categorized as helpless because he has the technical skill, but he doesn't know how to, respond to threats and the types of things they throw at him.
Yeah. So talk a little bit in terms of Mark as the protagonist, talk a little bit about that juxtaposition of this sort of average everyday guy in a thriller. Were there challenges to writing that type of protagonist?
Absolutely. To start with, putting yourself into the mind frame of, okay, if all of a sudden someone was threatening your family if you didn't do this, if all of a sudden you had both the FBI and a terrorist organization needing something from you with a very strict deadline and feeling like you can't please everyone. You can't save your family, not go to jail, and not get killed. You kind of have to pick which one you want. That's a frightening thing to think about. And so just kind of trying to get inside of Mark's head as those types of situations came up was both fun and challenging. And on a more tactical level, there are several scenes where he is running for his life, and he's running for his life from experts. So how would a typical accountant, who they're not necessarily known for their physical strength or stamina or anything like that, if you're trying to be true to who this guy is, he's not some sort of a special forces guy. How is he actually going to make it when he's going up against these guys that have been trained all their lives? And so creating realistic scenarios and storylines that sort of allow him to continue to survive and lean on what he does know, which is computers and finances. It was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of challenge because readers are sharp. And, if you try to throw a solution at a problem like that that's not well thought out and isn't realistic, it's gonna immediately devalue the book from their perspective because it needs to be true to form, and that's a hard thing to do. It would have been a lot easier in many cases for him to just be able to call on his special forces training to get out of certain situations, but right. Mark can't do that. So yeah. It was a lot of fun for that construct. It was a lot of fun to really kind of think through the best way that he could do that. But it was a lot harder than I thought it would be during the outlining process. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So like there's one scene and, again, we're not giving too much away. Of course, there's going to be chase scenes. He's running from someone who's chasing him on foot and somebody else who's in a car. So when you're writing something like that and you're trying to picture it, like, do you just try to picture it fully in your head, or do you actually go out and try to walk a route, or, how literal are you when you're trying to plan those things?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Sarah. And I will say that, every author is a little different, right? So everybody's got their own style, their own approach. For me, the more literal I can make it, the more authentic the writing is. So I actually go to all of these locations. I take pictures, I take videos, I review them on Google Maps. Mm-hmm. I walk into the rooms and I look at them, I smell them, I take notes, because I just feel like I'm putting something out there that someone is taking some time, they're spending some money, and they're taking some time to read, right? And mm-hmm. the best way that I can give them a product worth those two things is to actually physically be there as much as possible. Sometimes that's not, sometimes I've had settings in Australia that I haven't been to, so I have to kind of rely on some friends of mine that live over there and pictures and stuff like that. But most of this book is set in Richmond. I've been to Richmond. I've been to all of these places. I actually have a funny story. So it wasn't necessarily for this book, but in one of my other books, there's a bomb scare at a train station in Chicago, Ogilvy train station, transportation center. And so when I was researching that book, I went to Ogilvy and I was looking all around and I was speaking into a tape recorder and I was just taking field notes. And sure enough, 3 uniformed police officers came up to me and wanted to know what I was doing. And I realized, like, in hindsight, they were probably right to ask that question. But I'm very, very focused on getting the best firsthand accounts that I can. And so that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I've been to all of these places that are in the book, with the exception of the one that is kind of a made-up establishment. Mm-hmm. But most of them are real, and I have been to all of them when I was traveling to Richmond, and I really like to have that so that I can put it into the story.
All right, thank you. Research. What types of research did you need to do? I mean, obviously, besides location research.
Yeah, no, great question. So there's really 2 types of research that go into a thriller book. And interestingly enough, I've actually written a guest article for Writer's Digest on this, because it's a question that I get from a lot of my readers who are just kind of curious. I break them down into the affectionate terms of the big picture and the nitty-gritty. Mm-hmm. So for the big picture, for this book, the entire idea is sort of based around financial fraud, racketeering, and identity theft. And understanding what's happening out in the world today, like it's pretty scary how smart and innovative, identity theft and thieves are. I was the victim of identity theft about 4 years ago. And I'm here to tell you that it is a hellacious process when you become the victim. And there's a lot of people to help you through it. But these guys are very, very smart. They have learned the loopholes. They know how to navigate around the systems that are designed to protect us. So the general research part of it, or the big picture, was really kind of a frightening thing for this book, because everything that's in the book, like that could actually happen. Now, I'm not saying it has happened or it will happen, but the technology and the intelligence of the people that would be perpetrating this kind of thing on Mark are both available in the real world. And so I spent most of my big picture research on those themes to make sure that what I was putting in there was accurate and that it had a sense of authenticity to it. The nitty gritty side is a lot of like kind of what we just talked about, you know, particular location, a scene, what does it smell like? What does it look like? You know, one of my pet peeves is I've read books that are set in Chicago where I live, and I know that a particular street is one way, and I read that there's cars going in both directions. And, you know, that doesn't mean it's not a good book. That doesn't mean that it wasn't a well thought out story. But stuff like that, those nitty gritty details, to me, are what really helps sell the scene and really set up the scene for the reader. So I try very, very hard to get those right. And that's why I go. That's why I go there. I want to see for myself what it looks like and what it smells like and what's going on. And because I feel like readers respond to that, because we all see these details in our lives every day. And so that nitty gritty, it's stuff like that. I'm not a gun guy. I don't know really anything about guns. Well, there's a lot of information out there. So when I had to find the weapons that these guys used, I talked to a lot of people so that I could at least write intelligently about what kinds of weapons these guys would have, even though I personally don't know anything about it. Stuff like that. So nitty gritty and big picture for this book, those were the kinds of things that really went into the research side.
Yeah. I like that Justin talks about research in terms of those nitty-gritty details and the big picture. I know for myself that I tend to focus a lot on the detail portions of things, and so it can be hard to keep track, or it can be easy to lose sight of that big picture. You know, you want to get those nitty-gritty details perfect, but it's important to kind of keep both of them in mind. So I think that's a balanced way of looking at it. We're going to go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, it's a thriller, so not all characters have the best fates. We're going to talk about some of those characters and writing those characters. You are tuned into the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Jay Lee. We're talking about his newest thriller, The Reluctant Reckoner. Before the break, Justin was talking about research in terms of both the big picture and those nitty-gritty details, as he puts it. Let's go ahead and return now to the conversation with Justin. You mentioned guns, and because of the nature of the books that you write, there are casualties. So when you set out to write and you've got your list of characters and the people that you've kind of outlined, do you ever, I'll just say it, how do you decide who gets killed?
I wonder where that one's going. Yeah.
No, and are there people that you would never kill? Like, do you have a line where there are certain characters that you just would never?
No. I try hard not to set that line because, first of all, I have the unique gift to truly, it's not even a gift, it's a mindset. I'm in my own world and I don't really think about reality when I'm writing the books when it comes to stuff like that. Like, there's obviously some pretty bad stuff that happens in my books. They're thriller books. Thriller books are all based around conflict. Conflict has bad guys. Bad guys do bad things. So you have to have that in order to be authentic, because if all you have are a bunch of good people that are doing good things, you don't have a story that people really want to read within this genre. So I've always had the ability to not really connect it back to like any real people in life. If I couldn't do that, I would not write. Life is too short. I would not feel comfortable if it affected me in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but because it doesn't, I have no boundaries when it comes to who's going to go and who's not. You know, in this book, again, a little bit of a spoiler, but not too much. There's a character who very unexpectedly dies that I've actually gotten emails from people saying, I can't believe that happened. You know, so a part of it is, you know, as I'm outlining the story, I want the readers to be surprised. I mean, a part of it is actually deliberately not having those lines so that the reader can't predict the entire book from A to Z. And one of the ways that authors can accomplish that is they can have characters that people might be starting to like and think are going to be a part of this for the long haul suddenly disappear. Mm-hmm. But there's no I don't have a set formula for it. What I try to do is when I write the outline, I always know the general gist of how I want it to begin, how I want it to end. And then I work both sides together, meeting in the middle. And as long as the twists and the turns and the red herrings and the harbingers of the specifics support the overall plot and the overall story, I'm game. But I don't ever deliberately say, all right, well, I'm gonna kill that guy off. I only do that if it feels like it helps the book organically. And in a lot of cases in this genre, stuff like that really does. I mean, and it adds a dose of realism. I mean, these are really bad dudes that have been trained by some of the most expert professionals. They're going to have some wins. And so what do those wins look like in a way that supports the overall story?
Right. And you need to feel like there's, you need, as the reader, you need to feel like they are probably going to win. You know, like there's always that point in a book where everything just seems like it can't possibly work out. And, you know, and you as the reader know it's probably going to work out. I'm just not quite sure how we're getting there.
Yeah. And, but it's not gonna work out, you know, with 1,000 batting average either. I mean,
right, of course,
there are some, the good guy might win the war in the end, but he or she will lose some battles along the way in any thriller that I've read, because that's where a lot of the conflict comes from. And that's what keeps people wanting to turn the page, because they can't predict which battles are going to be lost. And you want them to root for your characters. And sometimes the ones that they root for don't make it and they get upset, but then they don't take anything for granted as they read the rest of the book. But it was funny that I had actually several people reach out through my website and tell me they loved the book, but they did not like that this individual did not make it. So, you know, I guess in some ways that's a win, but it doesn't always feel like it either.
Yeah, it is a bit of a compliment, you know, because you created a character that they were rooting for. But
exactly.
So you write thrillers, but when you think about the people who are reading this book especially, is there anything specific that you hope people will take out of it, or just, you know, to enjoy the story?
Sure. Yeah, really there are. The first is just sort of a general awareness that, you know, we should do what we can to protect ourselves. There are some comments and some tangential points that are made that we can all do to take better care and protect against identity theft, et cetera, et cetera. And again, having gone through it, certainly I hope people do that. But the other thing is, this book has, as does a lot of, you know, books in this genre, has the opportunity where normal everyday people have the opportunity to do the right thing. And so there's some self-sacrifice in the protagonist's decision matrix. And what I kind of hope people do, honestly, is they sit back and they say, okay, I could be Mark, right? I have this job, XYZ, and if this happened to me, how would I do it? And surely I want them to appreciate what Mark's decisions were and be glad that they're not Mark, right? And that's of course a part of it. But the other is to just, kind of realize that sometimes in life we do have to do things for the greater good, and sometimes a little bit of self-sacrifice can be a good thing. Now it's getting a little more deep than I would say was in my objective category when I wrote the book. But as you read actually most of my books, I realized there's a general theme of, hey, I could do the easy thing, which would benefit me directly, or I could help some people that I don't even know by doing the quote right thing. But there's some serious risk to me. I always hope people keep that in mind, because I'm a huge fan of generalized reciprocity, which means that what goes around comes around, right? You reap what you sow. And I think that especially at a time when it seems like there's a lot of division within the country, politics and all that other stuff, having that in the mind is certainly not a bad takeaway.
Yeah, I agree. You strike me as kind of an everyday person yourself. I don't know. You could have a secret identity that I know nothing about. And if that's the case, just keep it secret. But writing the books that you do, does it ever sort of come into your regular life where you're just in a situation and your brain starts thinking, wait, what would I do if X? Do you start thinking that way, or can you differentiate?
That's such a great question. The answer is yes, all the time. I'd like to think of myself as normal. I've been told that I march to the beat of my own drum in a lot of ways. So, but no, I mean, I've got a day job. I go to a day job. I got a family. I like to play golf from time to time. So, I do a lot of those typical things, but it happens all the time to me as a writer. I'm always looking at various situations. I mean, most of the books, so there's 4 books that I have published. All 4 of them came about really from just an everyday situation that I sat there and I thought, I wonder what would happen if. And then from there, that's where you kind of turn on the writing brain and try to map out, a storyline that makes sense. But the initial idea, you read a newspaper article about something that happened over here, you sit there and you watch kids play a baseball game, and yeah, there's something kind of, you could say that it's kind of weird about me, and I would imagine about a lot of mystery novel, suspense, thriller writers is, our stories are rooted in real life.
Yeah.
So in real life is where a lot of times the idea sort of forms. And then from that idea, we turn it into a story that gets legs of its own. But all the time, I've sat. I mean, just yesterday, I was picking things up out of a field that had just been a fescue field that had just been plowed. And as I was thinking, I said, what if I found X while I was doing this? Well, that could mean that. So yeah, it happens all the time. And I think to a certain extent it's healthy, as long as it doesn't, overcome us. But I mean, that's just imagination. That's imagination kind of going off in its own tangents. And that's where ideas for books come from. And I love to write books. So yeah, that does happen. But I am able to turn it off relatively quickly. I've read somewhere that, a very, very famous suspense writer who writes, like the really scary stuff, he dreams every one of his ideas. I don't do that.
Okay.
I don't do that. So there's a limit to it, but yeah, I do think that especially when your books are set in reality and not a fantasy or any kind of a science fiction, I think that there's some value in having the intersection of those worlds.
Sure. I would imagine, or maybe I'm just projecting, but either way, that you'd have to probably be pretty good about being able to compartmentalize when you write horror or thrillers or those sorts of things, to be able to compartmentalize some of that. I would hope that, again, here's the projecting, but I always think about putting myself into these situations, and hopefully I would be able to compartmentalize, because otherwise you're just thinking about it all the time, and maybe not maybe that's a good thing and maybe it's not. Probably different for every person. I really don't know, but we can ponder that as we go to this next break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about some of those ideas that come to Justin during different points of his day and what he does to keep track of them and potentially use them in future works. You're tuned in. Geez, you are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Jay Lee. Before the break, Justin was talking about imagining what if in a lot of real life situation, and how that imagining leads to some story ideas. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Justin. And I would imagine you're probably pretty conscious about either you have a really good memory or you remember enough to write them down later to have in your sort of what if file.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have a number of notebooks that are kind of positioned everywhere. I have them by a bedside table. I have them by a desk in an office, even in a car, because sometimes if you get that thought, I like to think I have a good memory, but I'm finding out it's not as good as it once was or as good as I thought it was. Yeah. And if I don't capture the essence of that idea right then and there, I might miss it. And that's a bad feeling. Like, we've all done that, right? You wake up in the middle of the night and you think of this great idea, but you don't write it down. And then the next day you're saying to yourself, what was that? Man, I know it was good. I don't know what it is, but I know it was good. So I am a huge fan of just jotting the notes down as they happen. And then, then you go back and maybe of the things that I write down, maybe only 20% actually become a part of a story. But I mean, if you think about it, that's 1 out of every 5 times. That's an acceptable ratio for the minimal cost of writing it down. Yeah. Yep. So do you do that? Can I ask, do you do that as well? I mean, all that you've got going on with all the different, like, are you I'm sitting there and I'm doing something else, but something comes into my mind and, well, this could really help with the broadcast, or what if I want to do a direction this way? And do you like write stuff down in a similar fashion? I'm not great about it, but I write more on my phone now than I ever used to, because no matter where I am, I tend to have my phone. So I'll jot a note on my phone. Do I then remember to go back and look at that note is the part where Fair enough. Well, the good part is, if you put all your notes in the same place, then if nothing else, you can just set a reminder to yourself to check your notes, just in case you wrote something down that you forgot about. There might be something good in there. Too funny. Heaven forbid I should, discover the cure for something and then forget where I wrote it down. Stranger things have happened.
Yes. So speaking of the what ifs, what are you working on now? What story is currently in progress?
So I actually have two different storylines as we speak. One of them is quite a bit further along than the other. So it's an interesting twist. It's still within the mystery suspense thriller genre, but this particular story is actually set about 20 years ago. Okay. And it's told a little bit more from a younger perspective. So it's not a young adult book, and it's not children's or anything like that, but it's a story that's really based around a sort of a small town experience and a what if of, well, what if this happened and what would happen with this town and how would all these different people react? It's a little bit different from anything that I've written, but I've really enjoyed kind of going down that path and toying with that idea. And then the other one is I've gotten a fair number of questions. It's all relative. I'm not getting thousands of.
You don't have to admit that.
Fan emails, but I have gotten quite a few questions from people asking me if my series characters are coming back. So Ben Siebert was the protagonist of my first two books. And quite a few people have asked, hey, do you think you're gonna bring him back and bring some of those characters back? And so I'm kind of toying with the possibility of doing that as well. Okay. So always a lot of different irons in the fire, and I just like to write, and we'll see which ones get the real legs, and hopefully have some fun announcements soon.
Sure.
Thank you for asking.
Well, I'm a little bit upset with you because you said it took place 20 years ago. So my brain is like 80s. No. Freaking this century. Shush.
Yeah, roughly 20 years ago. Call it the late 1990s.
Right. Oh, I hate those memes that are everywhere on social media that are like, we're further away from 1980. They were like, it's like, shut up.
Yeah. It really puts you in your place when you see something that says, like a picture of a famous movie or something that you remember watching, and it says, this was 30 years ago. Yeah. It's
the 35th anniversary. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah,
my youngest niece really likes to remind me that I was born in the 1900s, and that's the way she says it, the 1900s.
It's pretty amazing. I think that happened to me just the other day. A buddy of mine emailed me, and when we were kids, we played baseball a lot. So we were huge Sandlot fans, the movie The Sandlot. Mm-hmm. And he sent me a picture of all the little guys that are playing baseball. And it said, it said, think about how long ago this was, ... And it's just, it's the kind of thing that, all right, let's just scroll past that and keep moving.
Right. No, I will not think about how long ago that was. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I'm happy in my
delusion.
delusion.
The fun part about it is, if you think about it, so again, not to get, into too many details, but the setting was 1997. Okay. So the World Wide Web came out 2 years earlier. There was no real social media.
Yeah.
There was no proliferation of cell phones and smartphones and everything else. So that was a part of the mystique and the intrigue of writing it, is kind of going back to a time when, back then the primary forms of research were going to a library and looking at encyclopedias and microfiche, and you couldn't just Google things. Google wasn't around. So, kind of interesting societally how far we've come, because it blows my mind. I'm sure every generation says this, but I think that there have been more leapfrogs in technology in our generation than any generation previously. It's just, we hold more power in our cell phones than the NASA engineers had when they were landing space shuttles on the moon.
Yeah, it's crazy. Would our parents have ever thought that they would have a phone, a camera, a way to read books, and 90 other things in their pocket?
Yeah, it's it's a little scary too.
It is,
right?
which
Because as you start to think about artificial intelligence and you start to think about, things thinking for you and everybody being interconnected, whether they want to or not, there's certainly a dystopian element that your brain could go to if you so chose. And as I've gotten, older and grouchier and, kids are playing on the lawn, one of the things that I've realized is that, when I was younger, I always considered myself an early adopter, and I was happy to get the latest Gidget and Gazmo and whatever else. Now I'm definitely a latent adopter, because some of the stuff that's coming out these days, it just feels like it could be a little too controlling and a little too crazy for me.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it makes you think, what are my grandchildren, how different is it going to be for them? So,
there's a harsh reality here, Sarah, that just means we're getting old.
We are. It's true. Yep. I know that. Yes, Justin, I'm very aware. I'm very aware. And if I try to be unaware, my various body parts, as well as my youngest niece, really delight in reminding me that I am in fact old. And I'm okay with that. It's the result of several decades, many decades, somewhere between several and many decades on this planet. We're going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, we will be talking about what Jay has been reading. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Jay Lee. Before the break, we were talking about advancements in technology. There was a reminder that I am, in fact, old, and let's go ahead and finish this conversation while I go ice my knees or something. Okay, so what have you been reading that's fun to, kind of for entertainment?
Yeah, so I read newspapers every day, a lot of magazines. The two books that are kind of getting some attention each day are The Power of Habit, which is a very cool, strictly nonfiction book about what habit is in our brains psychologically and how we can try to create positive habits in place of negative ones. And then the other one is Desert Star, which is a thriller by Michael Connelly, one of my favorite authors. And so I always try to have a little bit of yin and yang when I'm reading. There's always like some nonfiction kind of, Malcolm Gladwell type story, and then a thriller that's in the genre that I like to write. And so those are the two that are open right now.
Okay. All right. People have further questions, want to know more about you and your books, social media, internet presence, social media, and website.
Well, I would be delighted to hear from anybody who has any questions. Probably the easiest way is to just go to my website, which is www.jleethrillers.com. So all one word, www.jleethrillers.com. And from there, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, Goodreads, Threads. There's even a TikTok presence, with some videos. So, if whatever your social media poison is that you prefer, you can have direct links to all of those from the same website. And there's an opportunity to sign up for a newsletter and a direct contact link. So please, if you'd like to talk, I would love to hear from you. And if you have any thoughts or criticisms or comments on any of the books, I would love to hear from you. So again, www.jleethrillers.com should get you what you're looking for.
All right. Thank you. Justin, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure you highlighted?
Not really. I just want to say thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity to chat with you, and I feel honored to be back and to have been one of your initial pilots, video participants. I think that you're doing some really, really awesome things, and I follow your podcasts and your website pretty closely. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And just thank you so much for taking the time out of your weekend and getting up. I joke that you're the crazy morning person. So thank you for getting up and talking to me on an early Saturday morning. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was a wonderful way to spend the time. So thank you.
Thank you once again to Justin for joining me again to talk about The Reluctant Reckoner again on the podcast. This is his second time, and not only did he ushered in the first video interview that I ever did, and he was the first, and therefore there was a lot of issues with that first episode, and he put up with a lot of technical stuff and a lot of things that I was learning, and he still came back. So Justin, thank you for that, and thank you for coming back to talk to me about The Reluctant Reckoner. If you are, my listeners, are a fan of thrillers, and maybe you've already read some of Justin's other books, maybe you are just discovering him as an author, but if you're a fan of thrillers and you like protagonists who feel a little bit more like you, or how you might react in situations such as those that Mark finds himself in, then you should definitely check out this book. Maybe you are working on holiday gifts and you are looking for the book lovers in your life, and you just happen to have book lovers who love thrillers. Well, then check out Justin's works. Justin's books. He now has 4 books, so there's even 2 that are part of a series. And if you or somebody that you're shopping for are looking for a new series, then you can check out those first 2. And then there's 2 standalones. So whether you like series or whether you like standalones, and if you like thrillers, then Justin's got some options for you. So go check out his books. And thank you to him once again. Thank you, as always, to you for joining me for this episode. I hope you will join me for Friday's episode. This time there actually is a Friday episode. Had some scheduling changes last week, so there was not that Friday episode that I said I wasn't sure if there was going to be, and it in fact turned out to not be a Friday episode. These things happen. We roll with the punches. But this week there is a Friday episode. So eat lots of turkey on Thanksgiving if you are celebrating, and then the next day take a break and come listen to a new episode. I am speaking with author Adam Nimoy about his book, The Most Human, Reconciling with My Father, Leonard Nimoy. Maybe you're a Star Trek fan. Maybe you're a Leonard Nimoy fan. This book is not only about Adam's relationship with his father, but about both of their relationships in with alcohol and drug issues and recovery, and then how all of that affected their relationship was already complicated. Had a great conversation with Adam. Really looking forward to sharing that with you. My dad was a Star Trek fan, and I came by my love of Star Trek from my dad. So I was so happy to talk to Adam about his dad and talk about this book. Also, in terms of, so please join me for that episode on Friday. Speaking of my dad, my parents, I want to just acknowledge that today would have been their 58th wedding anniversary. My dad died almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, so he is no longer with us, but sending lots and lots and lots of love to my mom on this day that would have been their 58th wedding anniversary. I love my parents. I got my love of reading from both of my parents, so I am very, very grateful that they decided to get married 58 years ago today and have 3 children, one of whom was very much a surprise. That would be me. So I'm grateful that I was a surprise and got to be here today to talk to you about books. And so love you, Mom and Dad. Happy anniversary. Thank you again for joining me for this episode. As always, if you're a fan of this episode, there's a few things that you can do that are very, very helpful. First, like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Very much helps the algorithm, as does leaving a positive review. Reviews don't have to be complicated. You don't have to overthink them. That's me projecting because I overthink everything. But one sentence, any review helps. And I'm greatly appreciative of all of the support that you give. As I said in the beginning, twice, whatever form that support takes. Thank you so much. If you're more of a social media person and you want to follow the podcast on social media, you can do so on Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, and we just set up a Blue Sky account. So whatever you're on, come find us on social media. Love hearing from you. Love answering questions or hearing what you're reading. Tell me what your plans are for Thanksgiving. I'm, for some reason, obsessed with pie this year. I just want pie. So come and tell me what kind of Thanksgiving pie you're having so I can live vicariously through your Thanksgiving eating habits. I hope you're having a great week. I hope that your Thanksgiving coming up on Thursday is wonderful, or, if you're celebrating on a different day, some people do depending on schedules, but whatever it is, I hope that you have a wonderful holiday. And whether you have a long holiday weekend or not, I still hope the week gives you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I will see you on Friday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to